Chapter 8. Identity Crisis. The town was quiet, nestled at the foot of the mountains, far from the chaos of cities and the constant hum of trainers and their Pokemon. The streets were lined with small, quaint houses, each with its own garden or flower bed, and the air smelled faintly of pine and fresh rain. It was the kind of place where time seemed to slow down, where the world felt smaller and simpler. But for Ash, it felt like a prison. He had barely left their small room at the inn since they arrived 3 days ago. Serena had tried to coax him out, offering to take him for walks, to get something to eat, to simply talk. But Ash had turned her down each time. The truth was, he didn't want to see anyone. He didn't want to be around people, to face their curious glances or their judgmental stares. He didn't want to face himself. Ash sat on the edge of the bed, his knees pulled up to his chest, his arms wrapped tightly around them. His reflection in the small mirror across the room caught his eye, and he quickly looked away, unable to bear it. The person in the mirror wasn't him. She was a stranger, a girl with soft features and delicate hands, long hair cascading over her shoulders. Her body was slender and feminine, her breasts pressing gently against the fabric of the shirt Serena had given her. Even the way she sat, her legs drawn up and close together, was something Ash never would have done before. But now, it felt natural. That was the part that scared him the most. The way his body was adapting, the way these changes were becoming normal. He could feel the weight of his breasts when he moved, the way they shifted and pressed against his chest. His hips swayed subtly when he walked, his long legs moving with a grace he hadn't possessed before. Even his skin felt different. Softer, smoother, more sensitive to the touch. The curves of his waist, the soft swell of his hips, the absence of the boyish strength he had once prided himself on. It was all too much to bear. Ash squeezed his eyes shut, his breath shaky as he tried to push the thoughts away. But they kept coming back, relentless and suffocating. The sage's words echoed in his mind, the finality of them crushing him. The transformation is permanent. Permanent! There was no going back, no reversing the changes, no returning to the boy he had once been, the boy who had dreamed of becoming a Pokemon master. That boy was gone, replaced by someone else, someone he didn't recognize, someone he didn't want to be. Ash felt a lump forming in his throat, his chest tightening with the weight of his emotions. He had always been so sure of himself, so confident in his path. He had known who he was, what he wanted, and how he was going to get there. But now everything felt uncertain, like the ground had been pulled out from under him, leaving him stranded in a world where nothing made sense. Who was he now? He wasn't Ash anymore, not the way he had been. His body, his voice, the way he moved, it was all different. He had the same memories, the same experiences, but it didn't feel like they belonged to him anymore. It felt like they belonged to someone else, someone who had been left behind. And the thought of continuing as a Pokemon trainer, of battling, of chasing his dream, it felt impossible. How could he still be the same trainer, the same person, when everything about him had changed? How could he stand in front of an opponent, knowing that they would see him as someone else? As a girl? Ash's stomach churned with anxiety, his heart pounding in his chest. He didn't know if he could do it. He didn't know if he could keep going, keep pretending that everything was okay when it wasn't. The thought of stepping into a battle, of commanding his Pokemon with the same confidence and determination he had once had, felt like a distant memory, like something that belonged to another life. I don't know who I am anymore. The thought came unbidden, sharp and painful, like a knife twisting in his gut. He had always known who he was, Ash Ketchum, the boy from Pallet Town who wanted to be the very best, like no one ever was. But now he wasn't sure. He wasn't sure of anything. A soft knock on the door pulled Ash from his thoughts, and he quickly wiped the tears from his eyes, trying to steady his breathing. He didn't want to talk to anyone, didn't want to face the world outside, but he knew who it was. Serena had been checking on him constantly, worried about him, trying to help in any way she could. Ash? Serena's voice was soft, hesitant. Can I come in? Ash didn't respond at first, his throat tight with emotion. He wanted to tell her to go away, to leave him alone. But at the same time, he didn't want to shut her out. Serena had been his closest friend through all of this, the one person who had stood by him no matter what. He didn't want to hurt her, even if he didn't know how to talk to her right now. After a long moment, he finally managed to speak, his voice barely above a whisper. Yeah. The door creaked open, and Serena stepped inside, her expression full of concern. She was dressed in her usual traveling clothes, her hair tied back in a loose ponytail. She had a gentle smile on her face, but Ash could see the worry in her eyes. She crossed the room slowly, sitting down on the edge of the bed beside him. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence between them was heavy, filled with unspoken fears and questions. Serena was the first to break the silence, her voice soft and careful. You've been in here for days. Ash, I'm worried about you. Ash didn't look at her, his gaze fixed on the floor. I'm fine. Serena frowned, her eyes searching his face. You don't have to pretend with me. I know this is hard. Ash's chest tightened, his hands clenching into fists. You don't understand. Serena's expression softened, and she reached out, gently placing a hand on his arm. Then help me understand. Ash felt a lump forming in his throat, the weight of everything he had been holding and threatening to overwhelm him. He didn't know how to explain it, how to put into words the confusion, the fear, the sense of loss that had been consuming him for days. But Serena's kindness, her patience, it was enough to break through the walls he had built around himself. I don't know who I am anymore, Ash whispered, his voice trembling. I don't know what to do. Serena's hand tightened gently on his arm, her eyes filled with empathy. You're still Ash. You're still the same person you've always been. Ash shook his head, his voice breaking. No, I'm not. I'm not the same. I don't even look the same. I don't feel the same. Serena's eyes softened, and she moved closer, her voice gentle. Your body has changed, but that doesn't mean you've lost who you are. You're still you, Ash. You're still the person who cares about his friends, who loves his Pokemon, who wants to be the best. Ash's breath hitched, his chest tightening with emotion. But I don't feel like me anymore. I look in the mirror, and I see someone else. His voice cracked, and he squeezed his eyes shut, trying to hold back the tears. I don't know how to be this person. Serena, I don't know how to live like this. Serena's eyes shimmered with unshed tears, and she reached out, gently taking his hand in hers. I can't pretend to know exactly what you're going through, she said softly. But I do know this. You're not alone. You don't have to figure this out by yourself. Ash swallowed hard, his throat tight. But what if I can't? What if I can't be the person I was? What if I can't be a Pokemon trainer anymore? Serena's eyes widened in surprise, and she shook her head. Ash, don't say that. You've always been a trainer. You've always had that passion, that drive. That hasn't changed. Ash's chest tightened with fear, his hands trembling. But what if it's not enough? What if I can't do it anymore? What if I don't want to do it anymore? Serena's expression was full of understanding, but there was also a flicker of sadness in her eyes. It's okay to be scared, Ash. It's okay to not have all the answers right now. But don't give up on yourself. Ash looked down at their hands, his mind swirling with doubt. How could he explain it to her? How could he make her understand what it felt like to lose everything that made him who he was? The thought of battling, of stepping into the arena and commanding his Pokémon with the same confidence he had once had, it felt impossible. He wasn't that person anymore. He didn't feel like that person anymore. I don't know if I can do this, Ash whispered, his voice barely audible. I don't know if I can keep going. Serena's hand tightened around his, her gaze filled with determination. You can. Ash, you're stronger than you think. She paused, her voice softening. And I'm going to be here with you, no matter what. We'll figure this out together. Ash's heart ached, the weight of her words, both comforting and overwhelming. He didn't know if he believed her, didn't know if he could ever find his way back to the person he had been. But Serena's unwavering support, her belief in him, it was enough to keep him from completely falling apart. For a long moment, they sat in silence, the only sound the soft rustling of the wind outside. Ash's mind was still a tangled mess of confusion and fear, but for the first time in days, he didn't feel completely alone. The next morning, Ash found himself standing in front of the mirror again, staring at the girl who looked back at him. She was beautiful, in a way that made his chest tighten with discomfort. Her features were soft and delicate, long lashes, full lips, high cheekbones. Her body was slender and curved, her waist narrow, her hips wide. She looked nothing like the boy he had been, the boy who had set out on a journey to become a Pokémon master. Who am I now? The question echoed in his mind, relentless, unanswerable. He had spent his entire life chasing a dream, defining himself by his strength, his determination, his identity as a boy who wanted to be the best. But now, that identity felt like a distant memory, something that no longer fit who he had become. Ash's gaze dropped to his body, to the curves that had replaced his once flat chest, to the way his hips flared out beneath the waistband of his pants. His breasts were small but unmistakable, pressing gently against the fabric of his shirt. He had tried to ignore them at first, tried to pretend that they didn't exist, but now they were an undeniable part of him. He reached up, hesitantly touching the curve of his chest, his fingers brushing against the soft fabric of his shirt. The sensation was strange, unfamiliar, but not entirely unpleasant. His skin was more sensitive now, more attuned to the smallest touches. It was one of the many changes he had noticed over the past few months. His heightened awareness of his own body, the way it moved, the way it felt. But even as he acknowledged these changes, a part of him still resisted, still clung to the idea of who he had been. He didn't want to be this person. He didn't want to accept that this was his life now. I'm not ready for this. The thought sent a shiver down his spine, his chest tightening with fear. He wasn't ready to let go of who he had been, to accept that he was no longer Ash Ketchum, the boy who wanted to be a Pokémon master. But at the same time, he didn't know how to move forward, how to live in this new body, this new identity. I don't know who I am anymore. The thought echoed in his mind, leaving him feeling hollow and lost. He was caught between two worlds, two identities, neither of which felt like they truly belonged to him. And the longer he stayed in this limo, the more lost he felt. 3 days later, Ash sat on the small bench outside the inn, staring out at the quiet street. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the town, the air cool and crisp. Serena was inside, talking to the innkeeper about their next move. She had given Ash space, knowing that he needed time to process everything, but she had also been there for him when he needed her, offering quiet support, a comforting presence. Ash's mind was still a mess, still tangled in confusion and fear. But as he sat there, watching the sun dip below the horizon, he felt a strange sense of calm wash over him. It wasn't peace, not yet, but it was something close to it. He didn't have all the answers. He didn't know what his future held or who he was supposed to be now. But maybe, just maybe, he didn't have to figure it all out at once. Maybe it was okay to take things one step at a time. As the last rays of sunlight disappeared, Ash took a deep breath, his chest rising and falling with the weight of his emotions. He wasn't sure where this journey would take him, or if he would ever truly come to terms with the person he had become. But for the first time in a long time, he felt like he might be able to keep going, to keep searching for answers, even if they weren't the ones he had been expecting. And maybe, just maybe, he would find a way to be okay with that.